last piece of DBT that we're going to talk about is interpersonal effectiveness. Basically, what that means is getting along with other people. We can recognize that our relationships with others are harder to deal with if we can't deal with what's going on already inside of us. And so when we're using our mindfulness skills and we're using the emotion regulation and the distress tolerance piece of it to deal with what's happening to us inside of us in the moment, then it makes us better able to have healthier relationships with others. And so by utilizing our DBT skills that we've learned already, the wise mind, emotion regulation, and distress tolerance, then we're going to have more effective relationships with others. It's making sure that we're getting what we want in a situation. I mean, that's ultimately when something comes up and there's a problem or there's a situation or a crisis, there's a piece of it of what I want. And we're going to look at that and we're going to say, okay, where does this fall? Is this something that I want, or is this something that I'm willing to maybe compromise with, or is this the way it's going to have to be? We're able to look at things and recognize, what do I want from this situation? What do I need from this? What do I have to do to get the answer that works, or the thing that works within this? Interpersonal effectiveness is learning how to have relationships effectively. We are building relationships. It's learning how to talk. It's using the I statements. Instead of saying, you make me, whatever, we're using I feel when. We're learning how to have a crisis. A lot of families think that when there's this crisis that comes up, family life stops, and it kind of feels that way. It feels like you can't go on and do anything. You can't do anything else because there's been this crisis. But when you're utilizing your DBT skills, you recognize that that's one piece, and that you can go on, and that you can still do other things and have fun doing other things. A lot of families sometimes get stuck in that kind of that rut of, oh, we have a crisis, everybody's mad at each other, or there's something going on that we're not dealing with. And so we get stuck right there and recognize that, hey, we can put that aside and we can do something else. And then it's learning how to have that self-respect and being able to interact with people, getting what you want, understanding that there's areas and times to make compromises, acting in a way that makes you feel capable and effective, and you feel good about yourself. We want to make sure that we're making those choices when we have a situation, and then we have this thought that happens and a feeling that happens. When there's the behaviors, we feel differently after each of those behaviors. And so we want to make sure that we still like ourselves afterwards, after we've had a situation. There is guidelines to this, and there's 3 different sections to it. There's objectiveness, effectiveness, relationship effectiveness, and then self-respect effectiveness. So we kind of talked about those. And again, there's acronyms in each one of these. And it's pretty simple. It's Dear Man, Give Fast. That's what we're going to talk about. Dear Man, Give Fast. And so it's kind of a quick little, you can kind of remember that and then go back and remember which each one of those Dear Man, what each one of those represents. The first term, Dear Man, we're learning how to describe the situation. Again, we've done this in mindfulness, so this is just another piece of the puzzle, and we're just utilizing it in a different way now because we have the skills to be able to recognize that we can do something different with the situation. So now we're describing the situation. This is when we're using I statements. This is when we're sticking to those facts, and we're using language that everybody understands. We can express our feelings in a situation. We don't have to just be the only one that feels that way and not know what to do with it, but we can describe how we feel and express how we feel. We can assert ourselves. We can ask for what we want, or we can say no in a situation. If we're in a situation and we can't handle something right now, it's okay to say no. It's okay to say not right now. We can't expect others to just know what we're thinking. We have to be able to let them know where we're at. That's part of asserting yourself. It's part of not just believing that they can see the stress that you're under, or they can see how overwhelmed you are. And then we want to reinforce. So we want to reinforce if we get what we want out of a situation, that's a positive reinforcement for us. But if there is a consequence in that, we recognize that there's that consequence. Understanding that there's either that good thing that happens or that consequence reinforces our behaviors, because we like it when we get what we want and things work out. We don't necessarily like it when we have those consequences. So we're able to, in our relationships, express and reinforce those outcomes and say, you know, I liked this. We did good dealing with this situation. This situation, maybe not so much. And we need to look at going through the cycle again, the situation, the thoughts, the belief, and then what the action was, and changing what can we do and do different next time so that it becomes successful for both of us. So that's the dear and dear man. For man, we want to be mindful. We want to make sure that we're focusing on our own objectives. So often we get caught up in, well, what do others want, or what do they, or what's it, and we're not recognizing, okay, what am I wanting out of the situation? Again, we go back and we ask ourselves, what do I want? What is the best case scenario outcome of this situation that we're in? We want to appear confident, make sure that we know that our feelings are our feelings. And again, there are no right and wrong feelings. Feelings are what they are. It's our actions in that. We want to make sure that when we're approaching somebody or asking for something, because ultimately we're wanting to get something, that we want to use a confident tone of voice, that we want to make sure that we're making eye contact, that we've got the body language that shows that you are assertive in this and that you're appearing confident, that there's that piece of it that you might not be, and you might kind of inside be going, but we know that this is what I need in this situation, and so this is what I'm going to ask for. This is what's going to happen. The last piece of this, the N in Dear Man, is being willing to negotiate. You have to understand that to get something, sometimes you need to give something. And so make sure that you're looking for different ways out of a situation. Make sure that if there's not just one way to get to what you want in it, there's a way to do that so that everybody is getting kind of what they want out of a situation, or at least they're getting a solution that works for everybody. So we want to make sure that we're looking at this and you're asking questions. What do you think, what would work for you? This is what would work for me. What can I do? What can you do? What piece of this am I willing to give up to kind of get what I'd like? And so we're able to use those Dear Man skills to be objective in our requests, in what we're doing. If we're asking for something, if we want something, if we're expecting somebody to do something for us, we're able to approach it in a very mature way and a way that is helpful and not harmful. Not just do this because I said so. We're able to put some padding behind that. The second piece in interpersonal effectiveness is relationship effectiveness, and it's how to be effective in relationships. It requires a give and take. It requires time and effort to be put into that, and sometimes we don't know how to do that. Oftentimes we see kids that come into ERA and they lack those social skills to have a reciprocal relationship with somebody. They just don't know how to do that. And so we teach them how to have a relationship and what that looks like, that there is a give and take to that there is kind of an ebb and a flow, that it's not always going to be perfect. It might not always be terrible, but there's an ebb and flow to that, and you can go with that. This is where we're going to look at the acronym GIVE. We want to make sure that we are being gentle, where we're being courteous and temperament in our approach. So we're making sure that we are, again, body language. Our body language is showing that we want to have a relationship, that we want this relationship, not that we're tense and closed off and just sitting there and kind of with a scowl on your face, because nobody wants to have that. Making sure that we're not verbally attacking or physically attacking. That doesn't make for good relationships. We want to not make threats. We don't want to manipulate. A lot of kids will manipulate friendships. They think, well, if you do this for me, then I'll be your friend. And we want to make sure that we're not putting those manipulating statements on it. And we want to make sure that we're not judging. That again, feelings and behaviors, they're two separate things. And it's the behaviors that we need to make sure are positive, but the feelings are not good or bad. That I and give is to act interested. To have a relationship with somebody, you have to want to talk to them. You have to listen to what they're saying. And sometimes if you've got a friend and they're talking about a video game that they play or a sports team or something, and you're not really interested in that, if you only look for relationships where everybody is interested just in the same things you are, that's not going to work. So it's learning how to be interested in what they're saying. As you listen to them and as you hear about the situation or hear about what they're talking about, you might find that you like that you find it interesting, that you're now interested in sports, or you're now interested in whatever they're talking about. And maybe that's something, maybe they're talking about playing a sport you've never played. And now you might actually want to give that a try. We want to validate. We talked about validating in the beginning. We want to make sure that we acknowledge the other person's feelings. Again, it's not right or wrong. We're not judging, but we're acknowledging the feelings. We're acknowledging what their reality, what their perception of reality is at this point. And we're validating that. I can see that you're upset right now. Or I understand how you feel. I understand how this situation would bring up this emotion. And the E is we want to use an easy manner. You know, sometimes we put a lot of effort into relationships and they become pretty robotic. But we just smile, be yourself, be who you are. Your personality is enough. And you can have it doesn't matter, you don't have to become somebody else to have a relationship. You can be who you are and have an effective relationship with somebody. You don't have to force people into being your friends or into this piece with your children that are at ERA, making sure that it's not all business, that we do recognize the fun in it, that is a relationship. Even though it's a parent-son or a parent-daughter relationship, it's still a relationship worth cultivating, and we still have to be interested in what our kids are doing. And we're teaching your kids here to be interested in what you're doing. I listen to numerous therapy calls, and it's very interesting to see the change in phone calls from the beginning of the program when kids get on with their parents and they kind of talk about maybe their day and what they've done. It's all self-focused. It's all, I did this, I did that, this is what's going on here, I don't like this or I don't like that. And as you kind of go through the end of the program and we've taught these skills on this relationship piece, you're going to hear a whole lot more questions about what's going on at home. What are you doing? And they're now interested in listening and seeing what you're doing, not just what they're doing. It's not all about them. So recognize that building these relationships happens not just peer to peer, but also parent to child and child to parent. We want to make sure that we're keeping our own values in building relationships. a lot of students, and maybe this is maybe why your student is here at ERA, because they gave up who they were at the core to be friends with people. They sacrificed their values, or they sacrificed belief system or rules because they wanted something different, or they thought they did. And so this piece of it, this last piece of our DBT skills that we're going to talk about, this self-respect effectiveness, might be the most important one of all of them. But it's something that once you get all the other skills down, you're going to recognize, oh, this happens. I recognize that I can handle emotions, and just because I feel a certain way doesn't mean I have to act a certain way, which means I don't have to compromise my values when I'm in a situation where I have a certain thought process. And what that translates to is, just because they do it doesn't mean I have to do it. Very simply. And so learning how to do all this helps us actually make stronger relationships that are healthy for us. So the last part of this is fast. So we're gonna be fair. We want to be fair with ourselves, and we want to be fair with others. Not everybody's going to work out. We're not going to be friends with everybody. Some people have a lot of kind of surfacey friends. They kind of talk to a lot of people, and some people have just a few really deep friends and people that they really talk to. And you kind of have to know where you are in that. So you have to understand and be fair to yourself and the other person. This is where that validation comes in. This is where learning what they are like and are interested in comes into play. We want to make sure that we have no apologies. We're not going to apologize for being or apologizing for making a request. I'm sorry I'm asking for this, or I'm sorry that I'm doing something, or sorry that I had a bad day. We want to make sure that we stay away from that, because again, the emotions that we're feeling and the actions that we have control over those, and we're choosing certain ways, and we don't want to go back and apologize for it, because that puts us back on the defensive. It's kind of like when we talked about using I statements and saying, you make me feel a certain way, versus I feel this way when this happens. That's the same thing with apologizing. Well, I'm sorry for being angry. Kind of we sometimes use that against our parents. Our parents use it against their kids, and we use it against our peers. We want to make sure that we're sticking to our own values. Utilizing the wise mind skills and the DBT skills gets us to understand what's really important and what's really at the core of who we are, what we want out of life, what we want to put our effort into, what we want to focus on. And we're utilizing all of these skills to get to that place. And so now we have a pretty good concept of what our values are and what we want and what we like and what we stand for, that we want to make sure that when we're looking at relationships that we're not giving up who we are, that we're not compromising those values. And then last, we want to be truthful. We don't want to lie. We don't want to act helpless. We don't want to exaggerate. We don't want to make up excuses. It is what it is. If something happens, it's not trying to justify why it happened. It's accepting this is what it was. That goes back to when we're sticking to our values, we understand that sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we don't live those values perfectly, but that's okay, because we've learned the skills on how to take and change the cycles that we were in to do something different. So if we've got a situation that causes a thought that gives us a feeling where we act and we do something negative, and that negative consequence, we recognize, oh, I can change that. I can do something different. And so it's all a learning process. It's recognizing that this is something that it's not something that you just all of a sudden do. It's something that you learn. And you might not get it right the first time. You might not get it right the second time. You might get it right the third time, and think, okay, now I've got it, and then get really upset at yourself because next time you get it wrong. But it's being able to recognize that. The piece of that kids often don't see is that if they're recognizing that they made a mistake and they made a wrong choice, that's huge. Because before they never would have said, oh, I guess I could have done something differently. It seems like it's just automatic behavior. So we want to make sure that we're being truthful with the people around us and who we are and what our values are, and we're sticking to those. So basically, interpersonal effectiveness is just understanding that it's okay that there's a give and take in a relationship, that there is that reciprocal piece. It's okay to want or need something from somebody else. That's fine. We go back to kind of that dear man. How are we going to ask for those things? We're going to make sure that we're describing, we're expressing, we're asserting ourselves, we're reinforcing behavior or reinforcing the outcome of that. We're being mindful of the situation and what you want out of the situation. We're appearing confident within that. This is what I'm asking for, and I have a reason to ask for this, and we're willing to negotiate. This will come into handy when your kids here at ERA that are looking to get signatures from staff on certain things, making sure that they're going through this. They're describing. If they just come up to staff and say, yeah, and hand them papers, staff's not going to know what they need to do. They're going to say, okay, these are papers. But they're learning how to assert themselves and saying, this is what I need. This is what I want out of this situation. At the end of this one-on-one, I would like to have your signature on this paper, and this is how we're going to do it. I want to talk to you about this paper. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what you need me to do if I'm not doing something that you see that I should be doing. I want to be able to talk about that, to have that give and take, utilizing these different skills. We want to make sure that there's balance too. It's not always work and it's not always fun, that there is a balance to that. When we recognize that we have control over our emotions and we don't have control over the situations, but we have control over our outcomes, what we do in that situation, then we're able to better balance things. Sometimes by recognizing that maybe we can't change the situation, but if we change our outcome, that automatically changes the situation that we're in. If we do something different, then that gives us a different starting point. We talk all the time, and I mean, you've probably heard the saying, if you want something different, you have to do something different. And utilizing these skills and recognizing that we're worth it, that having positive relationships is important, that when we take control of our emotions and recognize that emotions are just that, they're emotions. Emotions are not behaviors. And we have control over what our behaviors are. That gives us so much power. We're able to get into that place where we can radically accept situations, where we recognize that just because I don't like this situation doesn't mean, or just because I don't like the situation, it doesn't mean I don't have to accept it, that there's a difference between that. I can be in this situation, I cannot like it, but I can find something positive in it. I can change the way that I think about the situation. Part of having that relationship and recognizing the give and take is sharing and listening. So there's conversation that takes place. We want to make sure that when we talk to others that we're sharing our emotions and our feelings and and again, they're ours. They're not right or wrong. We might have the same situation happen and each one of us think of it in a different way. And so being able to describe how we're feeling in that situation and not just assume that the other person understands how you feel, because maybe they feel differently, because maybe the situation affected them differently. So we're doing that. When you're listening, skills for listening to others, I think that sometimes we get in the habit of formulating our response before the other person has even finished what they're saying. And so really we only listen to a portion of what they say, because then we're in our mind formulating this response of what we're gonna talk about. And we kind of don't hear the last piece of it. So we want to make sure that when we're listening, we're focusing on what the person is saying. We're not trying to describe the situation for them, but we're just listening. And we're recognizing that we don't have to create our response right away. We want to know what they're saying. After we listen, when we respond, if you don't understand something, ask questions. Maybe this is what's important when you're talking to your child, or when your child's talking to you, and you give them, this is what I'd like you to do. We have a conversation about expectations that need to take place. Or if your child is saying, hey, this is kind of what's going on, show them that you're listening by giving them a recap. What I hear you say is, you're pretty stressed out at school, but you've got some fun stuff to do this weekend, and so you need some help making sure that you stay focused on homework. And that, by restating what they're saying, they're able to clarify. They're able to say, no, maybe I said that differently. Or maybe I didn't mean it that way. Let me say it this way, or this is what I meant in that situation. But it gives them the understanding that you're listening, that you're actually hearing what you're saying. You're not just formulating your response. Well, you should, this is what you should do. You are asking for clarification if you don't understand something. Maybe you are going to put your own viewpoint on it. Maybe you're going to say, you know, how I would view that situation is maybe a little bit differently. And recognizing that because you're both learning these skills, that you're both able to now listen, understand, kind of share that emotion, and respond to each person. So what we're going to do is we're going to describe the problem. So if there's a crisis, if something comes up and we're angry, and maybe our kids were late from curfew and they didn't get home on time, and we're angry about that, whatever. And maybe they had the car and we need to go to work, and so it caused some issues. And it wasn't just the fact that they were late for curfew, there was other things with that. We want to make sure that we are talking about what the problem actually is, that what we're stating, what the conflict actually is. We're not just generalizing it and saying it's one thing, but we're actually breaking it down. We're making sure that we both understand where the conflict is at and why the conflict is a conflict, why this is something that doesn't work. We're expressing what's going on. We're expressing our feelings. We're expressing why this issue is important. We're discussing different ways to problem solve. We're not just talking about the issue or talking about the problem, but we're actually finding solutions. We're looking for that reciprocal give and take. We're looking for that, what do we each want out of this situation? Now, sometimes there's times when there's consequences, and the consequences are just that. They're those consequences. You were late for curfew, so the consequence for the curfew is what's written in your home contract. And recognize why it's important that this doesn't happen again. So we're talking about what can we do to help you not be late for curfew next time? Or what can we do? We're looking at different ways of problem solving. Again, we go into negotiating. We're then going to, if you can't find a solution that pleases both of you, let's look at a compromise. What's going to be? Now, this doesn't mean that we are compromising or negotiating consequences that have already come up. That's extremely important, that we're recognizing that when you have a home contract, when your student returns home from ERA, they have a home contract. You've talked about that. You've talked about what the expectations are and what the consequences are. So if something happens within that home contract, we're not going to come up and use negotiate here to make that different. There's still consequences. This is in situations outside of those types of situations. And then we want to make sure that what we've decided on works. Maybe it's argument between two siblings using a bathroom in the morning and getting ready. And so you come up with a solution, you negotiate, you go through all of this, you've recognized what the problem is. Each person has said they understand where the other person is at, they understand where they're at, they've been able to talk about their sides and why this is a problem. We've discussed possible solutions, we've maybe negotiated, okay, and we're not gonna both get exactly what we want, but I'm willing to do this, you're willing to do this. And then give it a time period. Let's say, let's visit this back in a week. Let's try this for a week and see if it works. And then you can come back in that week and you're gonna go through these steps again. Did it work? Do we need to tweak something? Do we need to change something? And then let's give it another time frame. Let's see, okay, let's give this a week and then let's come back to it. And when you find something that works, you're gonna use that. Maybe go back through each one of these webinars and sit and kind of focus on mindfulness. What is that? What are those what skills? How do I go back and observe and describe and participate and spend some time there? Don't just watch these all in one day and think that you've got DBT down. Understand that there's pieces of it that take time. There's pieces of it that are going to be easier for some people than for others. Pieces of it that you're going to go, oh, okay, I've got this, and pieces of it that you're really going to struggle with. And recognize that that's okay. And go through it and practice. Go and be mindful.